What if MK Ultra never ended? What if it just rebranded and you were the next target? Today, I want to talk about the history of MK Ultra and its evolution throughout the years. How it all started and what's happening with it now, and why I think that it personally has simply rebranded. So let's get into it. I like to trace back to the 1900s because we can get a lot of insight in what the people of prominence in our society were interested in. And the earliest research I personally have done was back to the IQ test. A man named Louis Terman, who was interested in eugenics, was the one that created the IQ test. And he started one of the longest run gifted program studies at that time in the early 1900s. I stumbled upon this when I was looking more into the gifted and talented program, but it was really interesting to me because when I was looking into the gifted and talented program, it also loops me into the whole monarch programming side of things. And then I was able to trace it back to the gifted IQ test in the early 1900s. So I'm sure there were other things happening in the 1900s too. So if I'm missing anything, please feel free to chime in the comments. But what was super interesting for me with this IQ test in the 1900s is there's a connection to somebody who later ended up working in our military and writing a book called From PSYOP to Mind War. And you've probably heard me talk about him on this channel a lot because this web of everything we talk about on this channel, with all the different kind of government programs, with mind control, with the gateway tapes, with gifted children, all of it kind of leads back to the same thing, which I believe ultimately is that there's a war over our consciousness right now. So back to who this character is. You may have heard me mention him, but his name is Michael Aquino. And since we're on the subject of MK Ultra, you may or may not know that MK Ultra was going on in the 1950s, which is when it started. But I feel like we're gonna have to backtrack here real quick so I can just give you a timeline before I get too ADD tangent. So let's step back for a second. 1900s, gifted program and interest in eugenics. By 1920s, we've got the first movie about aliens, which is a black and white French film. I forget the name of it. In the 1940s, we've got the Roswell crash. We've got World War II. We've got Nazi scientists trying to create the ideal race and annihilating a whole population of people. We've got, at the end of the 1940s, nuclear war in the Hiroshima and that disaster. And then around the same time, we had all the sightings of the UFOs. The government tried to hide, the Roswell crash, and the technology that was recovered at those crash sites, but allegedly got into hands of private military defense contractors and not necessarily our government. Let's wait for this plane to pass. All right. So 1940s, at the end of the 1940s, I want to say 1947 was when the CIA was created. So the CIA is created. There's all these projects that fall into the umbrella of the CIA. So we've got Project Bluebird, Artichoke. We've got what later becomes MK Ultra in the 1950s. MK Ultra is when they were using LSD in people's drinks, and they were mainly focusing on hypnosis and the effects of mind control. And there's a whole movie about it too. I think it's called MK Ultra, where that kind of gives a little bit of history. I'm pretty sure that's based on true events, a dramatized version of it perhaps, but they were also trying to train people to be essentially, I don't know if psychic soldiers is the right word, but basically weapons. They were trying to train people as weapons. And it's very scary when you start to look at some of the stuff that's going on in the world today, which I hope I remember to get into later. Because I'm thinking of rumors of people like, Charlie Kirk's assassination, how a lot of people think that the guy who, allegedly pulled the trigger, that it wasn't really him and that he may have been MK Ultra'd into doing so. And the odd thing about that, another side note, is that there's a movie called Distorted that came out around 2018 with Christina Ricci, and it doesn't specifically mention MK Ultra, but a lot of the whole movie's essentially about monarch programming, which is an offset of MK Ultra. So if you're interested in seeing how that kind of mind control could work in real life, they literally show you what they're doing in that movie, and they try to program her to assassinate a girl, and then at the end of the movie she doesn't, but they target her because she's mentally ill with bipolar, so a lot of people think she's crazy, so they don't believe that she's being programmed, even though she is. So anyways, let's jump back to where we just were. So we've got MK Ultra going on in the 50s, supposedly ends in 1973. Then we go on to the government, still has an interest in studying the exploration of consciousness and an interest in seeing how we can use remote viewing spies in our government, since in the Soviet war, during that time, I think Soviet Union and China, I think they had psychic soldiers that were children, so psychic spies. So the government, CIA, gets an interest in Robert Monroe's work, the Gateway tapes, and they do an assessment, an analysis of the Gateway tapes in the 80s, I want to say 1983. And in that, they mention how consciousness can be studied outside of time and space. They talk about the holographic universe, and then they talk about remote viewing. And I'm a remote viewer myself. I actually stumbled upon it by accident, and I've gone into that in other videos. If you are interested, I have a Gateway tapes and astral experiences playlist on my channel. But being a remote viewer myself, it sounds really crazy until you realize you can do it. And again, I wasn't even trying, and I didn't train professionally for it. It's just something that I saw other people could do, and then I tried it myself, and then it was accurate, and now I've been in business as a psychic since 2015 now. I think I started the readings in 2017, but yeah, almost a decade now. So anyways, remote viewing is a real thing, and CIA trains people to do that. So then we have Project Stargate, which I think is continuing the exploration of that research. And then the 90s happen. We've got a rise in the gifted and talented programs, even though the gifted programs were definitely around before that. And I want to say the gifted programs, at least people on my channel, they remember attending a gifted program as early as the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Except in those testimonies of their GATE program experience, they remember more MK Ultra kind of things, like the separation of children in other rooms, watching certain tapes, being asked questions by men in black suits, the Zener cards, the hearing tests, the gateway tapes, the audios, the frequency, and doing weird projects. And then if you talk to a lot of GATE or gifted and talented kids in the 80s and the 90s, you continue to hear all of these testimonies from GATE kids who remember working on like cracking codes for aliens, or they remember working on Morse code, or they remember building interesting things with Connect. And then the craziest thing, I fall into this category too, but on my channel, when I started talking about GATE, one of the things that I mentioned was my memories as a kid, not only of having a very vivid dream that felt very real of little gray aliens coming to my house, I also sleptwalked a lot, and I've seen a couple alien movies recently. I forget her name, Elizabeth something is in it. Elizabeth Banks, I think, might be in it. I think it was called what's it called? It's about a little boy. They adopt a little boy, and then find out he's like an alien or something. I think it's that movie, or it might be Dark Skies. But there's a movie about a kid that's an alien, and the whole family sleepwalks a lot. And then in that movie, at some point, they talk to like UFO experts and people who've had experiences with UFOs and ETs. And sleepwalking is apparently this huge thing where these aliens are able to control them through sleepwalking. So that just kind of like blew my mind a little bit, because I remember all the times that I sleptwalked a lot as a kid. And I started asking questions when all this gate stuff started coming up in the media, because I'm like, why did I end up psychic? And I've been like this black sheep my whole life, and I've had all these weird psychic experiences, and I've been gaslighting myself for most of my life. I was, went down the path of being told I was mentally ill or neurodivergent, and then it's like, oh, if it's not this one thing, if it's not bipolar, then it must be borderline. Oh, if it's not that, it's anxiety. Oh, now you have depression. Oh, now you have ADHD. Oh, now you have generalized anxiety disorder. Oh, now it's just codependency. Oh, now it's just alcoholism. So it's like literally essentially the same thing. But all these different names for it, and all these different ways that they gaslight you out of into trusting your own psychic abilities. So what I found on my channel through sharing my own testimony is that so many kids remember flying in the astral realm, and the weirdest thing about that is like literally having dreams where you're like pedaling the air. So you like have these techniques of knowing how to fly, which is so wild, especially because people are talking about mall world now on TikTok, and they remember going to the same place, and all these liminal spaces are coming up in conversation. So you can see this web just keeps growing and growing. And what I'm seeing a lot of patterns in are this interest in gifted, talented, neurodivergent, psychic people, and the controlling of their experiences, and the gaslighting of trying to make them believe that something is wrong with them, that they're neurodivergent in a negative way, like it's a bad thing, like you don't fit in, so we have to medicate you. Okay, but my question has always been, especially as I've been on this journey for more than a decade now, and everything that I know, that everything I've taught myself, everything I've experienced, I've taught myself, or I learned from other people who had the energy, the glow about them, that I was like, I don't trust a therapist, but I trust you for some reason. I don't know, something about your energy, something about your aura, like makes me trust you, and the fact that you've been through it, versus me going to all these therapists and it's like they're reading from a textbook. They don't know, like, getting heated over here. Not that they don't know what they're talking about. I should say most of them seem like they have not experienced what they're talking about. And it's very hard as somebody who's been through trauma and experienced it. For me personally, I'm always going to heal better and trust the healer and the teacher that is trying to provide me with healing tools if they've also been through it. I don't understand how you can like teach something that you don't know about. So when these therapists are just teaching from textbooks, it's not very authentic to me and never really resonated with me in the same way that going into a recovery group and working with, other people who struggled with alcoholism, or other people who had psychic abilities, but they didn't know how to wake up to them. And then one day they started, figuring out how to wake up from them. So anyways, I think that's interesting, and it says a lot about, like, just brings up a lot of questions, like what's going on. And if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, the 1900s, the interest in eugenics, the interest in gifted kids, they wanted to study gifted kids. And what does gifted mean in a lot of ways? Gifted means psychic. And now, since we're on the subject of MK Ultra, I want to talk about why the offset of MK Ultra, which many people believe is monarch programming, why they may have such an interest in controlling consciousness or spiritual experiences. So a lot of people associate monarch programming with MK Ultra, but as I said earlier, MK Ultra, it could be associated with so many things, like basically all the CIA projects that have been, called different things. Project Bluebird, Artichoke, Project Stargate, the study of the gateway tapes. There's a bunch, I think there's studies about something about S4 Bob Lazar talks about, and then MJ12 is a thing. I think that was about aliens or something that were recovered at the crash site. Now, of course, all of these are like black book private studies, and Project Looking Glass, that's another one. But again, they're all alleged. So I don't know if it's like the rumor mill and, fake insiders coming out to say stuff, but it's all programmed and told to us in a way that gives us just enough information to kind of dangle the carrot, but it's not exactly what's really going on. Or if this stuff is like so true that it's been wiped from the internet any way they can, and they've gone so far as to eliminate anyone who really talks about it and gets on the nose about it. So that's for the viewer. That's for you, my loves, to decide. But all of that to say, all of these little umbrella projects kind of fall under the bigger umbrella of MK Ultra. But what was interesting for me is this, sorry, got a hair on my camera, but is an interest in the study of gifted children, and where I started to really dig into this information. It was after a personal experience I had, which you may have heard me talk about on my channel, about gang stalking and targeting when I was trying to break into the comedy and entertainment scene a handful of years ago, when I was working on a podcast about alien exposure and about infiltrating the Illuminati. So when I started that, it was all fun and games until I met some people, and I don't know if it was method acting and it like manifested these experiences. I don't know if I attracted that kind of crowd or these strange experiences because I was talking about it. So naturally, if you're talking about mysterious stuff and exposing the Illuminati, maybe you're going to attract people that have interest in conspiracies, in starting a cult, in practicing black magic and the occult and witchcraft, and people who like to talk about conspiracies. And maybe they saw me as a person who wanted to learn more, and they thought, oh, maybe this is somebody I can, try to mind control and just like see what happens with it. Or maybe they were really working for an organization and they were, Masons or one of these secret society bloodlines. Like, I don't know, because I don't know if I can trust anything that they ever said to me. They were either a psychopath who was just having so much fun with manipulation, or they really were part of these things. I may never know, but I talk about it because a lot of weird things happened that year, like things with actual magic. I felt like there were spells and curses on me, and I'm not alone in that. There's so many other people who had a lot of spiritual attacks in 2023 and 2024. That seems to be the year that they're really cracking down on more, not more spiritual, but like people who are tapped into their gifts. And I've always been open about tapping into my gifts. I talk about astrology all the time, and my work for the last 8 or actually 10 years, if you go back to when I started to make the crystal jewelry that I used to sell before I expanded fully into the readings. I've been doing that stuff for a long time. So anyone could have been tracking me on social media, have a profile on me, know what I'm about, and then try to get in there and control that narrative. So you're not helping people wake up. Instead, the focus is on conspiracy. Instead, the focus is on Aleister Crowley, which is what they were trying to get me to read, but I have no interest in Aleister Crowley because I don't like the dark stuff. And I don't deny that it exists and that it's not powerful. I just don't put my focus or my consciousness there. Therefore, these days, does not affect me. And that's a huge thing I talk about on this channel too. I made a whole video about handlers and how they have to have your consent. So we give people consent to mess with us. So if you've ever had any kind of gang stalking experience or MK Ultra type experience, just know that you're more powerful at the end of the day than they are. And a lot of this is just programming, but it's programming we can overcome. So anyways, all of that experience led me to start looking up. Actually, I just stumbled upon this article, or this book. I keep calling it an article because I found it on the internet, but it's a book. It's called The Illuminati Formula Used to Create an Undetectable Total Mind-Controlled Slave by Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier. It's based on testimonies of ex-programmers and victim testimonies, people who have grown up in these family lines that are also often involved in the military or intelligence agencies and secret societies. And the whole focus of that book, they talk about how we're programmed from a young age. So they're mostly talking about the people who have DID and multiple personality disorder. But mind you, this book came out in the 90s, and that may have just been the first test group. Because what I am finding in my life, the more and more I connect to other people who are in gifted and talented, or just people who end up on my channel who resonate as empaths, neurodivergent souls, like feel like they're a starseed and they're just like not from here. What I think, based on the book and the programming tactics that they talk about, it seems like it's something that has been done on a mass scale. So I have gone more specifically into those program tactics in other videos, which you can check out. One of them is called Programmed at Birth. And then I also have a couple other that are just about monarch programming, why you don't remember or why you have fragmented memories, and then do you have a handler, signs of monarch programming. So we get more into the exact programming tactics in those books. But just to kind of sum it up for you here, the programming starts before birth with medication that is given to the mother. Then a lot of babies born into the hospital system have traumatic births. According to this book, they have Illuminati or secret society nurses that come in as handlers for the babies, and the early programming starts then. Not to mention that a lot of the doctors are also there under their umbrella too. So anything that's a doctor is telling people, a doctor can be a handler for millions of people if it's up and coming science. So one of the things that they talk about a lot in that book is like coddling a baby, always stroking that baby. And it's so crazy because my mom told me, oh, your doctor told me to always like be, touching you and stuff. And I think that's why you ended up so intelligent. Also, you were breastfed. And I think that plays a big difference too, because they're not formula fed babies. So that also can be associated with intelligence and IQ, but so can touching a child and then working or being affectionate, but also working with that child from a young age with learning shapes, reading early. And there's so many GATE kids who are reading by like 1 or 2, like at such early ages. And a lot of this stuff even started before preschool. And then when we get into splitting, the splitting happens at birth, but then they're able to start programming, from my understanding, at 18 months old. And that might look like hearing tests, like eye tests and the flashing lights. That's all mentioned as a programming tactic. So I don't know, this was 30 something or more years ago. I don't remember much from my childhood other than I do remember my whole childhood was like eye tests, and I am blind in one eye. I had early childhood surgery around 18 months, which is or literally at 18 months, which is the time they mentioned. So again, this is all just speculation on my end and just, talking about ideas from this book. So take it or leave it, take everything with a grain of salt, and also remember that stuff has changed since then. And then another really interesting thing is that Fritz Springmeier, the guy who co-wrote this book with Cisco Wheeler, got in trouble and got arrested for a robbery. So my question is, was he a bad guy? Was he planted to act like he's an insider and telling us this information? Or was he really onto something and he told all their secrets and gave it away? And then they, the outliers, did something about it and made sure that he was not taken seriously so he could stop writing books, because he also wrote one about the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, and he goes all back into their spiritual beliefs and teachings. So Saturn is mentioned a lot in that book. And then if you look at the entertainment industry and you're looking at like the Saturn Awards for movies, you're looking at Saturn and the Nike logo. You can see it in Pepsi logo. I think that's another one. Allegedly, again, for fun and entertainment purposes only. But we see a lot of Saturn imagery in movie production companies and logos and brands that we all know. And then another one that somebody pointed out was Mountain Devil. If you look at the logo, it looks like Mountain Dew. I already said it. Mountain Dew, the logo looks like Mountain Devil on the side. So again, I don't know if these are just conspiracies that people are noticing or if there's really something to that and there's something, that went into the thought of the design for these popular logos. But when you think about what Mountain Dew is pushing out and all these energy drinks, all of it is just straight up poison, which leads me back to the Monarch Programming article, because the Monarch Programming article has like 4 pages of substances that they used in programming. So similar to what they were doing in MK Ultra, except they're applying this when they program these young people. So as I was saying though, that book talks about the religious aspects of it, or how they all believe in Saturn, who I think is representative of Satan. I didn't quite read that deep into that part like I feel like I should have. I was more interested in the programming part and how they split the identities. But one of the things they talk about for the reason behind that is that they want to program it with demon altars, because they found when, this is messed up, this is what Nathan Reynolds talks about in a podcast too, if they hold someone underwater, and I'm thinking like a KID underwater, and they lose consciousness, they can take on an entity, and then that entity can predict the future. So a lot of these power-hungry societies think that, they're obsessed with worshiping these deities or these gods or entities, and those entities need a sacrifice in order to tell the humans what's happening. But if you really, I don't know, my experience as a human on this planet is that I think my understanding of entities or archons or whatever are that they're highly deceitful and deceptive. And anything that we create with our mind or believe can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think about what these families have been studying allegedly for all these years, and they might have interest in these deities. I'm not saying like whatever, like that there aren't really reptilian creatures that exist, because who knows, according to a lot of these insiders and whistleblowers, there are. And you know, the UFO disclosure movement, there's rumors about Lacerta, the reptilian. I've seen videos about that. And then a lot of people in the alien disclosure movement say that these creatures have been around for a while. We've got people like Dan, I think what's his name, Dan Duvall, on Taylor Welsh's podcast, talking about how he does deliverance on clones. So there's people talking about how the government has secret clones of people, and it's using, you know, gifted kids or other fragments of our identity to place in clones or creatures, and who knows if they're fighting battles off planet, because there's literally people who talk about this stuff on the internet, and psychic soldiers or super soldiers, I forget what they're called. I've seen videos on that. So there's so much information out there that we're in this day and age where it's like, it's not that far-fetched. But I very much believe in this idea of a holographic universe, and my personal experience has been, I've seen some bad things in life, but I've also overcome a lot of those, and I see a lot of these mind control traps. I see why people stay stuck in the lower levels of consciousness. A lot of it might have to do with certain families that they grew up in, and the fact that it would be, I imagine, extremely hard to walk away from family members and like everything you know if you found out that they were into this programming. Not to mention that all of this programming and conditioning, especially when it comes to religious organizations and like cults and whatnot, are conditioned from a very young age. So all they know, all they grow up with, all they experience are what they experience with these magical beings. So take somebody else, for instance, who grows up on another side of the country, and maybe they're more, you know, their family line is more associated with like angels or fairies or these higher vibrational entities and whatnot, and they're like a monk, or they're, I don't know, like I'm thinking more of like not such a traumatic spiritual experience. But if somebody grew up in such a different environment, maybe they grow up to be somebody like Darius J. Wright, for example. Like I hear him talk about his experiences when he was a kid. And if you don't know who Darius J. Wright is, he's somebody who does out-of-body experiences, and he's on all these podcasts talking about what the 12 dimensions are like, or whatever, what it's like being out of body. And he shares about those experiences. And I at least have never heard him talk about Illuminati bloodlines or anything dark like that. When the few episodes I heard where he was talking, the few episodes I heard where he was talking about his childhood, it sounds like he grew up in a family where they taught him how to meditate young as a kid. So it sounds like he was doing this stuff his whole life as a kid. So I could be wrong. I don't know much about his history, but I'm just saying that there are different, you know, based on our life path, what we grow up in, I think there's different spectrums of what we can experience spiritually. And the reason some of these life paths have so much energy and so many real things happening. I mean, just look at what's going on in Hollywood, and if you've ever been, you know, close to those people, like, you know that black magic and the rituals are real. Like, I've felt the presence of demonic entities before, so I believe they're real. But I also believe that when we recognize our power, we're not any different than them. If anything, humans are more powerful than these entities. Those entities have the power to deceive. They have the power to control through the mind. And if you're not aware of your vessel and what you're putting in it, what you're consuming through TV, through media, through other people, you transfer energy by being around somebody, by the content you watch. If you're into, we'll call it corn, and you're, a man and you're watching this stuff every night, and those people are like a traffic light, okay, talking in code here. But if you're absorbing that every night through the screen, think about your spirit and what you're absorbing. So we have to be really careful about the programming that we watch, the media, the people we hang out with, and wake up and have conscious control over our energy field. And most importantly, our belief systems, because we have to remember, all of this is programming and conditioning. And the only reason a lot of these people stay with these families and these experiences is because they grew up in them and they learned things and they saw things, and they can't unlearn it and they can't unsee it. But even though I've had probably like a sliver of that kind of experience, I can't imagine the depths that some people have experienced in this lifetime. But even the really frightening slivers of that kind of experience that I've experienced, I know the fear that can come with that, and it's just really mind-boggling to believe that this kind of stuff is actually going on. But thank God I had some experience prior with meditation, with more positive aspects of life and healing tools. So I am thankful for my addiction because it introduced me to a lot of these healing modalities that I wouldn't have experimented with ever had I not been addicted to alcohol at a certain point in my life. And because I already had tools, I was able to make it through those extremely frightening experiences with these supposed organizations or whatever I experienced when I tried to break out into the entertainment industry. So that's why I'm so passionate about teaching these tools, because when I came face to face with that kind of demonic type stuff and saw that this, Hollywood programming and these rituals and this black magic, and these cults, all of this is very real. And it was a lot closer to home than I ever would have imagined. And I truly believe I was trying to be recruited into a cult or something. I don't know. But I was able to get out of it and stop the black magic attacks and stop those people from getting my life. And that's not to say that I don't have weird people stalking me on the internet, but for the most part, we can block them. For the most part, you don't have to respond to their messages. And the most important thing to remember is they cannot control you. They can only make you think that they can control you. And based on your own emotional state at the time and your own beliefs about life and the universe and the world, you may fall for it. You may think that they have that control over you. So that's kind of what's happening on a larger scale with this massive mind control and the evolution of MK Ultra and these monarch programs. I think that maybe monarch programming and MK Ultra was the start. So MK Ultra may have been the start of consciousness, and then we get into the gateway tapes and we realize we can take it to the classroom with school and nap time and use model things off of Robert Monroe's teachings and brainwave entrainment, and then we can start programming the media with these ideas. Then we can start bumping up these influencers, because not everyone's watching Hollywood, but what's really powerful is micro influencers. But if they want to join the Hollywood club, they're going to have to come to our rituals and do the things. And that's why there's absolutely gatekeepers in Hollywood before you reach certain levels of mass success and overnight fame, and you see all these Hollywood people pushing somebody you've never heard of overnight. That's definitely a thing. But I also want to say, on the internet, I think there are also influencers who have had a lot of power, and it doesn't mean that they've worked with somebody to make them. A lot of these influencers, if they're anything like me, they've been working for years at developing a platform and doing this kind of work. Literally, this is a decade of me starting Statements by Alex, and this is the first time I'm actually speaking, because for 10 years I've had attacks on my throat chakra and not been able to speak about a lot of this stuff publicly because I was scared and I wasn't fully in my power. But now, after being face to face with these kind of people and this kind of experience, I know that it's real, and I know the fear of God that was in me when I experienced it, and then I got myself out of it using the tools that I've been teaching all these years. Now I'm passionate to share that with other people and help other people. And I don't want anyone to ever feel like they can't share their story or they can't go out and leave the house because these people are left and right. I want to remind you, granted, I did not leave my house for a year, so I understand the fear. But in that year, I built this channel. I quit MJ and alcohol, and I'm sober now, and I started eating better, and I started a daily walk, and I share a video every single day. So in that year of, escape from those people trying to lay low, I built something. I built something that's impactful, that hopefully is helping people. I know that it's reaching who it needs to reach. So even if I never, make it big or whatever, or I get hateful comments, because I get plenty of those too, I know that it's affecting who needs to hear it, and that's what matters. And you have something inside of you too that somebody needs to hear. So that's why I encourage you, anyone watching, to not be afraid to speak your truth, share your voice, because that's what I think this evolution of consciousness is all about. And that's what I think MK Ultra and Monarch and all of these side subheadings and sub projects of MK Ultra were trying to do. They're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to control consciousness. It's these small groups on top, these little organizations, these cults, whatever, that believe so much in their ideal. They want to remain in control. They want to have power. And they've conditioned all the people who work for them, who become the worker bees of society and the handlers to other people, like a big pyramid effect. Like that's why do you think the Illuminati symbol is a pyramid with an eye in it? It's because like the eye is enlightenment, and well, I don't know if this is right or not. I'm just saying what I think it means, but a pyramid makes sense that there's little people on top, and then they have, little ants doing all their work because they condition people. It's all about mind control, the third eye. But you can wake up to that power too. That's why I'm so excited and passionate about this, because I feel like I have, and I can share the tools with you. I have an ESP development course for how I was able to develop that. Plus these daily videos, I always try to leave something uplifting in them, because I want to remind people you have the power within you to rise above this programming. So yeah, if you need somebody to work with one-on-one, the tools that I am comfortable sharing, I don't do counseling because I'm not a therapist, and I get so many stories, I don't have time to, I just don't have time to listen to stories. So what I can do is astrology readings, and I can do human design readings for people, and I have tools that you can purchase or get for free in my description of every video, my link tree, Statements by Alex. And the other thing that I'm committed to right now that I'm prioritizing is making daily content that makes you think, that reminds you of your sovereignty, that provides tools for healing if you don't have them. So anyways, hopefully you got something out of this video, and you don't have to be the next MK Ultra target, because you have the power in you to rise above and to wake up that third eye. So thank you for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.